only child of John Alcedo. The first thing I want to do being up here is to give thanks to everybody. I want to give thanks to everyone who's donated, everyone who shared the link for the GoFundMe. I wanted to give thanks to everybody that's helped and are not here, whether it's in person or through Zoom. A lot of people made today happen. Thank you for everyone for keeping us in your prayers. Thank you for your condolences, and thank you for being a part of my dad's life. Yeah, thank you for your support. This is a really tough time, and all the love means everything. It really does. So, my father passed away 17 days ago, and I thought I had more time. I thought I had a lot more time. So many things led up to that moment. So many potential plans we had, so many things we wanted to do together. And the weekend prior, my dad, he went to the hospital, and we talked every day. We talked multiple times a day, sometimes even multiple times within an hour. And we had great conversations as always. And one of the things I wanted to bring up is when he opened up to me, it was one time in the hospital, he opened up to me telling me that he was scared, he was nervous, he was anxious. And I told him, Dad, everything's gonna be fine, man. You're the strongest person I know. You got this, you know? That's all I was telling him. I told him that we planned to see each other that following Saturday. And I said, I love you, told you I miss you, and we'll keep talking. We'll see each other soon. And he reciprocated everything. When he left the hospital, we talked a couple times. FaceTime, he had a great conversation with the kids. And he talked to me, we had a great conversation. The next day was the day before his passing. And he called me a couple times. I failed to answer. But later on that night, see, there's this thing called FaceTime photos. When you're on FaceTime, you can click a little button and it takes a picture of the person. My kids would always take pictures of my dad when they'd FaceTime. So my daughter comes up to me with a picture of him, and he says, I miss Lolo. I miss him so much. And I told her, okay, I'll let him know. As in, I was gonna send that video to my Lolo, because at the time my dad lost his phone. So I was gonna send that video to my Lolo the next morning to show, so they can see that my, Jayla missed him. The next day, I called him at 9:30 in the morning. I called him to ask if he wanted to live with us. And, he didn't answer. Little did I know is because 2 hours later I would get the notification that he was no longer here with us. And that was just, it hit me, harder than a brick, it was just tough. But one thing that remained a very large factor between that time and now was resilience. I guess another really tough thing was we had planned to always see each other. We'd always planned to see each other during the time we moved back to California. Sorry, I'm scrolling through these pages because I'm trying to get it together. Give me 1 second. Oh yeah. So like I said, I planned to, I did call him 9:30 that morning to ask him to live with us. He went to visit us in Colorado when I lived there last year, and we had this whole plan, and it was set. It was, I go to school, transfer to whatever college I transfer, and he would go with me everywhere I go, be there for the kids the way he was there for me. But after he passed, it was just crazy, because to think that he was already gone when I had called him. To think I took the video of Jayla telling me she misses him less than 8 hours before he passed. To think that I reassured him that past weekend that he would be okay, but he ended up passing. To think how I didn't answer his calls the day before. I just thought I had more time. We We lived pretty far from each other. I lived in Orange County, probably a 2-hour commute to him and 2 hours back. And when we would make plans to visit him, it was just, there'd be change of plans sometimes. Sometimes weather was bad. Sometimes he'd tell me to stay back because it was just too traffic. He didn't want me to deal with it. Sometimes I was too tired from work to be able to, him and I didn't trust myself to drive 2 hours back and forth. But every single time, there was no doubt that when we would reschedule, we have a new date locked in. And that's one of the hardest part, was that this time there was no new date locked in, no rain check. So I knew, I felt that at that time, the hardest thing for me was just knowing that I don't know if I was, not knowing, I was in denial, so I didn't know if I was gonna see him again. But back to resilience, my dad taught me so many things. In a way, I feel he taught me almost everything I know, whether it was direct or indirect. A few things he taught me directly, sports, music taste, spreading positivity, driving stick. But things he taught me indirectly. I remember when I was little, I would tell him all the time, I'd say, "Dad, I love you," or "I love you, Dad." And he'd always say, "I love you too, son, but always love your mom more than me." He would tell me other times, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. You're my hero." He said, "When you grow up, don't be like me, son. Be better than me so you can be my hero." And then I'd always ask, "Dad, how come you don't have a girlfriend?" He said, "I don't need a girlfriend, son. I got you." So I guess in a way, he taught me how to be humble and never put myself first, because he never put himself first. He always put everyone else before him. So he did a lot in teaching me how to be the person I am today. I'm gonna spill the beans right here. I think only like about 5 of you in this whole room know this, but there was a time when I was little, my dad and I didn't have a place to live. It was after we moved out of our first apartment, and before there was a time where we were tenants to other people's houses, every so months. And when you're little, you don't really remember how long things are. So I guess I got older, I started asking my dad, how long were we struggling for, And he told me the time we were tenants switching houses, it was probably like a year. Every couple of months we'd switch to someone's house, be a tenant at their house. It was about 4 to 5 months we were living out of his car. This was before the movie Pursuit of Happiness, by the way. I'll get to that later. So I'll never forget, I'd get off school, I'd go to daycare, and my dad would pick me up from daycare, and he'd take me out, and we'd go to a park. Like, not just any park, like one of the nicer parks in the valley. Really busy. So I'd go to the park, and he'd take me to the park, and I'd be really bummed out. Everything I wanted to play with was occupied, and there were mean kids around. So we would leave. My dad would take us to get dinner, McDonald's, IHOP. He loved Denny's and IHOP, so we'd go there. When it's time to wind down, we'd go back to that same park, and no one was there. And he told me, "Look, son, there's no one here. You got the whole park to yourself. And you don't got to worry about those mean kids, because the only person you got here with you is me." So at that time, every single time that happened, I was the happiest kid in the world. I had a whole park to myself. I was happy. Even when I got bored playing at the park, he would sit me on his lap of his red Pontiac, and he would drive around the parking lot while I would steer. And when it would be time to sleep, he'd crack open his sunroof, and he'd recline the seats, and we'd look up at the sky. And he told me when there was no clouds that the stars are angels looking out for us. And he said when there was clouds, he would say, "When it's my time to go, look for me in those clouds, the way Simba found Mufasa in the clouds." Every night when we go to sleep, he would tell me, "Everything's gonna be okay, son." The crazy thing is, I didn't know nothing was wrong. I was happy. He taught me perspective. As I got older, that perspective led to resilience. Resilience is what kept me up through all my tough times, through every time I felt like I was at an all-time low. But on September 5th, when he passed away, I feel like my resilience disappeared. This began a domino effect of emotions with the factors I explained earlier. The thoughts of guilt. I felt guilty. I felt guilty for not sending that video of Jayla to my Lolo right away. I felt guilty for feeling like I lied to him when I promised him he was going to be okay. I felt guilty for leaving and being gone for 8 years in the military. I felt guilty for not having him live with me sooner. And I felt guilty for the times we had to postpone our meetings, and damn, I felt guilty for not answering his calls. I was drowning. It affected me really bad that when my cousin Megan made the GoFundMe page, I didn't want to share it. I was very discouraged. I didn't think anyone would care to help the cause. We'd do the nightly novenas and I wouldn't show my face because I didn't want to just break down. I felt dark, and put it straight up, I felt like shit. Then September 8th happened. That was that following Friday. I started that day with an audiogram appointment, basically just monitoring the loss of hearing I had during my time in the military. And as I stated earlier, I lived in Orange County, and my appointment was in downtown LA. I spent a lot of the drive in tears and listening to music that would bring me more tears. And as I passed Crypto.com Arena, formerly known as the Staples Center, I remember the last time I was there for a Laker game. It was with my pops. And then I remember the drives we'd always have when I was little. And he'd be in the driver's seat, and I'd be right there in the passenger seat. And he'd reach his hand like this, and I'd put my hand in his, and he would turn it, and he'd hold my hand throughout the whole drive. I do that now with my kids because of him. So I decided to do that. I reached my hand in the passenger seat, and I closed my hand, and I turned my hand over. And when I turned it, I felt warmth. Is that my dad? I looked down at my hand. It was just the sun. Or was it? You see, I'm driving in downtown LA, and there are buildings, skyscrapers giving shade. And when I was in the shade, I still felt the warmth on my hand. And I felt his energy. As I went to my appointment, got done, and I came back, and I checked on the GoFundMe page, and it hit its first 1,000. And I said out loud, I looked at my passenger seat, I said, "Dad, we're getting there, Pop. You see that? Don't you worry." That did a lot for me. Seeing that first 1,000 made me feel confident enough to finally bring exposure to it. If you guys follow me on social media, you may have seen that Friday I'm talking about. I posted a video because I finally felt that I had enough courage to do so. I reflected on the things that made me feel guilty, and I remember my dad always told me, "John boy, don't be like me. Don't dwell on your past mistakes. Keep going. You can always make your future better than your past." On that day, my resilience came back, and I started my real journey to healing. Since then, I ended my nights looking at the sky, searching for my dad, the way he told me to when I was little. I speak to him every time I'm alone driving in my car, or when the kids aren't being makulet at home. Every time I saw a new donation or someone share his page, I would say it again, "Dad, we're getting there. We got this, Pop. Don't worry." I sang all the songs he loved hearing me sing. I sang all the songs I loved hearing him sing. And finally, after a whole week of his passing came by, he visited me in my dream. During the past year, he'd forget to hug me. When I'd visit, he'd forget to hug me all the time. And I'd get on it for that. "Dad, don't forget to hug me, man. What's going on with you?" He's like, "Oh, my bad, Jim boy. Give me a hug." And I'm like, "You're just saying that now because I reminded you, you know?" So in my dream, I saw him, and he was glowing. And I would say a lot of things happened in that dream, but I'm just going to share this one thing. I ran up to him, and I gave him the biggest hug. And he told me, "You better watch out, son. I'm not going to let go." I told him, "Don't." And he said, "Well, I have to." And he said, "I'm fine. I'll be okay. I'm already okay." Then he kissed me on both cheeks, and he said, "I'll keep visiting you, son." So, like I said, more things happen in those dreams, but that's a story for another time. On this day, I feel like the best stories to tell are the stories of, they're not, the best stories to tell aren't the stories of my dreams or what happened days before his passing or days after his passing. I feel the best stories to tell are, well, stories about my dad. So before I go on to finish this, I just wanted to share those stories. One time I got my dad in trouble, big trouble by him. That woman right there, my mom. I was in elementary school. My dad picked me up from daycare, and sometimes he'd stop at a store, right? I was little, I didn't know what it was. I just know we'd get to the store, he'd go inside, he'd come back, I'd stay in the car, and we'd go home. You know, he had a bag, I didn't know what was in there. And at the time I was learning my letters, I was learning how to spell, right? So when we were little, when we spell stuff, we spell the letters, we say the letters, and then we recite the word with pride and emphasis, like juice. Juice, juice. So we're driving, and I see the familiar sign, and I say out loud, my mom passes by it, and she hears me, my little kid voice say Liquor. But she didn't hear me say the word liquor after that. I said Liquor, Papa store. So I grew up hearing that story from my mom, and as I got older, I asked my dad, "Is it true I got you in trouble?" And he was like, "Yeah, man, you snitched on me." And then I was like, "What happened?" I got a phone call. "John, anong ginagawa mo? Dinadala mo ba si Jeremy sa liquor store?" My dad said with complete shock, "Who told you? Your son did, huh?" So, you know, my mom put my dad in check, and I guarantee you after that I never went back to Papa's store. I believe that happened when I was like first, second grade. So about a year before my dad and I were, you know, struggling like I told you guys. And during that time, after that whole period of struggling, there was mom and dad to the rescue. My Lo and Lola had my dad and I move with them to Stevenson Ranch. I don't think anything crazy happened in my childhood during that time, but I remember I beat my dad a lot in basketball. I was really proud of that. I was only like 10. I was beating him in basketball. But then fast forward to 6th grade, the movie Pursuit of Happiness came out. And I went to winter break, and my dad and I saw the movie, and, you know, I had to go to the bathroom, and coincidentally, it was that scene. Have you guys seen the movie? You guys remember that scene where Will Smith and Jaden are in the bathroom? So we're walking down the theater, and that scene is happening, and I just see them, like Will Smith holding his son, you know, people banging on the door, they're trying to sleep. And as we walk out the doors, I go to my dad, I'm like, "Dad, do you remember when we lived like that?" And he was like, "What are you talking about? We never slept in no bathroom." And then I was like, "Oh, okay." And then, anyways, fast forward to the start of school, it picked up. And I remember all the kids, you know, some people saw the movie, Pursuit of Happiness, and we were talking about, like, what was the craziest part? Let's rewind back to that day I saw it. My dad told me when we got home, he's like, "You know, I think we missed the part where they were so hungry they were eating the toilet paper." And I was like, "Really? That happened?" He's like, "Yeah, that happened." So I go to school, and the kids are like, "What do you think is the craziest part of the movie?" I was like, "The part where they ate the toilet paper." Everyone looked at me like I was crazy. Like, "Did you see the movie in Chinatown or something?" Like, "No, I saw it in the theater. Like, that never happened." I'm like, "My dad told me that happened." I go home, and my dad said, "Yeah, I just made that part up. That never happened." He made a lot of things up, you know, always to mess around and joke around. But sometimes there came up things he made up for disciplinary action. You know, normal things we say as parents, like behave or the police will come, or don't swallow seeds or that fruit is going to grow in your belly. Or the Filipino ones, like the rules of the restaurant is you're not allowed to cry or they're going to kick you out, you know? Or stop making that weird face, it's going to get stuck, you know? My dad was no stranger to those. But his best one that worked on me to make sure I got out of trouble was, "Jam boy, why you acting up, son? Keep acting up, I'm gonna send you to Michael Jackson's house, Never Land. You wanna go there?" "No, no." One time he actually drove in a part where we saw Six Flags, and he told me, look, son, there's Neverland. You want to go? I'm like, no. I never was bad again, no pun intended. Eventually, I didn't work. I moved with my mom to Southern Tahunga. It was like a mini town in there, population 20. All my cousins and aunts and uncle. It was just a crowded house. You know, they'll tell you they're all right there. And we all live together, you know. So, if you guys know that area, it's not the best area. So when my dad would pick me up on the weekends at night, we'd see fights all the time. We'd see people like pull out weapons, and he'd be like, I was 13, so I thought it was bad. He was like, no, oh, this doesn't scare you? This doesn't scare you? I'm like, no, what are you talking about? Like, you know, I'm from LA, that's why they call me OG, right? I'm like, yeah. And then I'm not scared still. I'm like, okay. So I guess the hood in the valley wasn't enough for him. He brought me to the real hood, which is funny enough. I work in Compton now, but that's where he took me. He dropped me off at a block, and I don't know what street it was, but since I worked there as a truck driver, I've seen enough streets to feel like I feel like this street looks familiar. But he dropped me off at the block. He said, walk the block. I'll see you at the end of the street. And then not even halfway, I'm walking, and I see a Samoan guy grilling barbecue in his front porch. He sees me. He's like, what you doing? I'm like, my dad's trying to teach me a lesson. He's like, oh, come on, get some barbecue, man. So he invited me to the front porch, and all of a sudden, like, I'm talking about why I got in trouble for my dad, and all of a sudden I hear, Jeremy! Then I see his car, like, just driving slowly, like, he's just looking at Jeremy! And then finally I was like, that's my dad. And he's like, oh, he ran to the street. And then he started whistling. My dad U-turned. I was still at the porch eating my chicken, and I see them, and my dad's just making him laugh. And the Samoan guy points at me, and my dad runs to me, and he gives me a hug. He's like, I'm sorry for putting through that. I'm like, no, I was good. You saw I could handle myself, you know? So I guess that day he realized, oh, okay, my son can handle himself. That's a story, by the way, of how we got a nice free lunch in Compton. So my dad admitted he didn't need to worry about me, but I kept being trouble. You could even ask my Lolo out here. I was trouble in high school. He lectured me. He had really weird ways of punishing me, but I'll get to that. He lectured me on who not to get involved with, though, because obviously, you know, we were in Compton. I was trying to be at home. I'm about the streets, you know. So he said the first thing you need to do he was telling me people who not to mess with, like by race, and who not to mess with. And he said, you always want to make sure you have black friends. So funny enough, my two best friends are black, and I was like, why? And he's like, because if they're your brothers, they'll always get your back. I'm like, okay. And he said, now, who not to mess with? You don't mess with Asian people. I'm like, why? And he's like, son, I grew up in LA. It's one thing to get jumped, but it's a different to get jumped by someone who knows Kung Fu. And the thing is, he was serious. He was completely serious. And then he started, he changed his demeanor. He started laughing a little bit. And he was like, and then the second person, people you don't mess with, are Mexicans. And I'm like, Mexicans, why? And he was like, because they know Mexican judo. And I'm like, Dad, I don't think that's a real fighting style. And he was like, Mexican judo is dangerous. You know what that is? I'm like, what? He's like, judo know I got a knife. Judo know I got a gun. Judo know. So he was obviously joking about the Mexican judo thing, but he was dead serious though about the Asian thing. He said, you don't mess with people who know martial arts. They're going to mess you up. Then for high school, I moved back with him. And like I said, the weirdest, strangest punishments ever. I remember one time I was in trouble. I forgot what I did. But I went to school. I noticed my backpack was a little lighter than normal. So I get my class materials out. And my school supplies were a notebook, a binder, a couple pens and pencils. And I opened my backpack. And my Lolo had a printer. And inside my backpack was a bunch of white blank sheets of paper. And my only writing utensils was 3 crayons. 2 of those crayons were white and yellow, and the only dark colored one was purple and was broken. And I was like, what the heck is happening? I go back home. My dad got home at 6. I took the bus. I was like, Dad, why did you, and then he showed me, under his bed, he had my stuff. Next to his alarm clock was like a 20-something pack of Crayola crayons. And I'm like, what? Why'd you do that? He was like, did you learn anything? I'm like, yeah, that I want my school supplies. He's like, you'll get it when you be good. So like I said, I forgot what exactly I was in trouble for, but he told me, remember what you do in high school affects your whole life. He said that in 10 different ways, the exact same thing. I said, Dad, why do you keep repeating yourself? He said, and he started, his seriousness went to joking. He goes, because, back in the hood, they call me Johnny D. I'm like, and he's like, you know what else they call me? Johnny Two-Time. Because every time I say something, I say it twice. You know what I'm saying? I go somewhere, I say hi, I'm saying, what's up, man? How you doing? And I kind of rolled my eyes. I was like, oh, all right, Dad, Then he gives me a brown crayon. And he said, since your purple crayon broke, here's a brown one. I'm like, you're not gonna give my stuff back? I'm like, no, you're still in trouble. So here's this brown crayon. It's sexy. You know why? I was like, why? So if you don't know, Crayola crayons name their colors with an adjective first. For example, like brick red, daisy yellow, midnight purple. And he said that brown crayon was called Foxy Brown. The rest of the week consisted of him creating fake names for all those colors. He changed Foxy Brown to Diarrhea Brown. He said, here's period blood red. Here's booger green. Here's bladder yellow. And the rest of the year consisted of him showing off his adulthood. I think that was one of the few times my dad showboated when it was actually like real cool stuff he actually did. So he went with the Foxy Brown thing and he turned into, I hung out with Bobby Brown in his prime. And I'm like, no, you didn't. Next week, I hung out with Snoop on it in his prime. I'm like, no, you didn't. And I would hear stories when I was little, confirm now that one of the cool things he actually did was adobo and being on Soul Train. So as I got older, I realized, like, I don't think he was really showing that off, because I know he's not like that. I feel like he was just trying to compete with me. He's always trying to compete with me. That went the same when we played basketball. Like I said, I beat him all the time, and then I realized he made varsity in LA High with a team full of brothers. So I realized he was letting me win the whole time. So that's one thing we talked about all the time for the past couple of years, is how we need to play basketball again. And he never knew this, but I dreamed of that moment so I can give him back the wins he gave me. I wanted to let him win. I wanted to give him everything I could for taking care of me and just being the best father I could ask for. I will say, even though I could have given everything he wanted, if you know my dad, he's pretty cheap. Even though I given a lot of stuff, like presents, stuff for kind gestures, but he prefers like free stuff. So, like, like a lot of times in the room, we take advantage of Costco free samples. I look at my days back in the military, and my parents were proud of me. A lot of people were proud of me when I joined the military. But no matter how proud my mom and dad were, they loved one thing more than being proud of me. And it was just this one thing. It was the one thing. Every time I would go back home, it was this one thing. I'll get to my mom in a second. But, for example, I'd be like, Dad, I'm hungry. And instead of brainstorming where he wants to eat, he's thinking about that one thing about me being in the military. And he said, you better find a place where they have military discount. I was like, Dad, you can't always go to places with military discount. Yeah, sure you can. They do military discount everywhere. So fast forward to the week of my dad's passing. We did the GoFundMe page because we're struggling financial hardship, and I'm on FaceTime with my mom, and my mom decided to bring up her own version of military discount. She said, "Oh, Mogi, what if you're a veteran? What if the veterans can accommodate your dad's services?" And I was like, I'll go check. So I went on VA.gov and I read, and I told my mom, I was like, no, Mom, the VA only assists with burial or cremation services only if the deceased is a veteran. And then the light bulb by my head turned on. I remembered my dad would always say, I was in the military before my son. People would be like, yeah, really? Like, yeah, I was in Old Navy. And then if that didn't work, my dad would always say, and then I also spent some time at Salvation Army. So I don't know, maybe the VA would have helped out. Real talk though, the funding for today came through, and it's all because of everyone sitting in this room. Whether you donated or shared his page or were a part of the planning process. Like I said in the beginning, we're all here today because of everyone here and everyone not here. Everyone contributed, and I know my dad And he's so happy to see all the love and support we're showering him in. The most positive person I know. He told me some things last year in Colorado. And I promise these are the last two things I'll tell you guys about, or stories. He opened up and got very vulnerable with me. And the first thing he said was, look at you, son. You got your own house, you got a family, in the military. You know what you did? I asked him what? You got better than me. And because you became better than me, you're my hero. And we kept talking and talking and talking. Eventually, he got to the topic of when his time would come. And he told me, when my time is here, I know you're gonna cry. It's okay to cry, go cry. But I want you to laugh more than you cry. And if he wanted me to laugh more than I cry, I know he'd want that for all of us in here. He wants all of us to remember him as the one that knows how to put a smile on all our faces in a snap. So as I close out, I just wanted to get 3 more things out the way. It's a combination of words of wisdom and how I'd like for all of us to carry on. Number 1, do your best not to fight with your parents, because you never know when the time is up. And not just parents, but everyone in general, people that you hold close to you. Value your time with them, because you never know when the time is up. 2, I've told a lot of stories up here about my dad. And I'm sure everyone here has stories, if not stories, at least a story. So if you have stories about my dad, go ahead and share them. Let's spend our day reminiscing and remembering his comedic self. And 3, let's do what he would want us to do. Let's get together as we are today. Let's sing, let's dance, let's joke, and more importantly, let's laugh. Let's let resilience win today. Let's give my old man the win. And let's celebrate the life of the one and only John Alcedo, aka Johnny D, in the place to be. Thank you all, and as my dad would always say, more power to you. Oh, we do got a video. If you guys,
You can do that after.
Oh, okay. Okay, we're doing that after.